In the scorching heat of the summer of 1932, tens of thousands of American veterans descended on Washington, D.C. These men had once fought for democracy overseas in the trenches of the First World War. But now, jobless and desperate, they fought for something different: economic survival, justice, and the fulfillment of a government promise. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of From the Ashtray, where truth drifts through the smoke and the real talk burns through the noise. I'm your host, Calix Rivers, and today we are going to be touching on a topic I'm not relatively sure most people are aware of. Today we will be discussing America's veterans from the First World War, also known as the Great War, and the deal that the U.S. government made to them that almost went unfulfilled when thousands of angry and pissed off veterans marched onto the Capitol looking for answers and instead found betrayal and injustice. 1924, years after the Great War had ended, Congress passed the World War Adjusted Compensation Act. This law awarded veterans of the war certificates worth $1,000 to $1,500 depending on how long they served. However, there was a catch. These certificates could not be redeemed until 1945, just a little over 2 decades after most of the veterans had returned home and the bill was passed. At the time, that promise was tolerable. But by the early 1930s, it was a cruel joke as the economy began to slowly deteriorate and jobs became scarce. The Great Depression began in 1929. It began with the stock market crash on October 29th, 1929, a day forever remembered as Black Tuesday. By 1932, the Depression had hit the country so bad that 1 of every 4 Americans were unemployed. Among them were thousands of veterans who had once been hailed as heroes, now living in squalor and unable to feed their families. In Portland, Oregon, an unemployed veteran named Walter W. Waters took action. Waters began speaking to other veterans at soup kitchens, relief centers, and on street corners where he would consistently propose organizing a march on Washington, D.C. in protest, demanding that the veterans be paid their promised bonuses earlier than the originally arranged date. The idea of bold action inspired hope. Waters began to organize local meetings, gathering small groups of veterans and urging them to spread the word. As his idea began spreading like wildfire through word of mouth and unemployment lines and flyers, Waters amassed an astonishing following of nearly 300 veterans. On May 17th, 1932, he and his group of veterans began what they called the Bonus Expeditionary Force, a march across America to the nation's capital. Their demand was simple: immediate payment of the bonuses they were promised. As they moved eastward, the march gained momentum. Veterans from across the country joined. Many hitchhiked, rode boxcars, or simply just walked. By mid-June, more than 15,000 veterans had reached Washington. Many brought their wives and children. With nowhere to go, they set up massive encampments, the largest of which was on the muddy flats across the Anacostia River, and they were here to stay until their promised reward had been given to them. The main encampment became known as Camp Marks, named after a sympathetic D.C. commissioner. It housed nearly 10,000 people, with hundreds of makeshift shacks, tents, and lean-tos. Despite the conditions, the veterans maintained order. They created streets, sanitation centers, and a military-style code of conduct, and elected leaders. Police Chief Belham Classford, a World War I veteran himself, supported the men. He used police resources to deliver food, medical supplies, and portable toilets. He described the veterans as peaceful and disciplined. The Bonus Army's arrival caused a national stir. Newspapers across the country covered the story, and the public was largely sympathetic to their cause. Congressman Wright Patman of Texas introduced a bill to authorize the early payment of the bonuses to the veterans. And on June 15th, 1932, the House passed the bill largely due to public pressure and the visibility of the Bonus Army. But they passed it. However, just 2 days later, on June 17th, the Senate overwhelmingly rejected it, 62-18. News of the defeat reached the camp late that same evening. Though disappointed, the veterans remained calm and disciplined. Some left, but the majority of them stayed, determined to wait out the summer in hopes that the government would reconsider. But by late July, the government grew anxious, and Washington's residents began to fear that the Bonus Army was becoming a threat. Although no violence had occurred by this point, the sight of thousands of destitute veterans living on federal land unnerved officials. President Herbert Hoover ordered Attorney General William D. Mitchell to take action. And on July 28, 1932, Washington police were dispatched in an attempt to remove the Bonus Army members from occupying a few vacant government buildings near Pennsylvania Avenue. The police confronted the unarmed veterans, where they opened fire on the crowd for some reason. In the ensuing chaos, two vets, William Hushka and Eric Carlson, were shot and killed. It's just absolutely despicable. Their blood stained the Capitol steps. Panic spread, and the veterans resisted by throwing bricks and retreating to the camps. Chief Glassford pleaded with federal authorities to stand down, but his pleas were largely ignored. President Hoover, the oh-so-great president he was, instead called in the U.S. Army to handle the situation. General Douglas MacArthur, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army at the time, was placed in command of the operation. With him were Major George S. Patton and Major Dwight D. Eisenhower, who later, as we know, become a very famous president and general of the Second World War. On July 28, 1932, General MacArthur mobilized 500 infantrymen, 500 cavalrymen, and 6 light tanks. The veterans, many with their families in tow, watched in utter disbelief. Once hailed as heroes, now being treated as criminals as they watched U.S. soldiers wearing the same uniforms that many of them once wore, advancing with bayonets fixed to their rifles. Tear gas canisters were thrown, exploded in the camp, fires broke out as the advancing troops began torching the shanty towns. By nightfall, Camp Marks had been engulfed in flames. Women and children screamed and coughed through the clouds of tear gas. The sky over Washington that day had a slight orange hue to it. The soldiers had cleared the camp. No one was spared, including women holding babies in their arms. General MacArthur claimed that the Bonus Army was plotting a revolution against the U.S. government. However, U.S. intelligence had already conducted their own research and had concluded that there was no communist threat or influence. President Hoover, watching from the White House, had completely lost control of the situation and the narrative. Nothing was left but ruins. The public response, however, was swift and damning. The American public was horrified that the government had turned its military on their heroes. Hoover's popularity plummeted further, and just 4 months later, Franklin Delano Roosevelt won the presidency in a landslide. In 1933, a second bonus march came to D.C., where this time, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt herself went to visit the veterans. She spoke with them, shared coffee with them, and just listened to their stories. She determined them to be peaceful and nonviolent. They were just veterans, heroes, normal people who wanted their government to listen to them. The bill was reintroduced in January of 1936, where this time Congress passed legislation to pay the bonuses out, overriding President Roosevelt's veto. Bonus Pharmacy's legacy is bittersweet, to say the least. Their protest failed in the short term, but ignited a fire that refused to go out and reshaped how America treated its veterans. This struggle eventually laid the groundwork for the GI Bill, which transformed the lives of millions. And in 1932, America failed its heroes. But those same heroes never gave up on America. The Bonus Army's march was with dignity and humility, and although it took years, justice was eventually and finally served. Their fight wasn't just for a bonus, it was for every veteran who would follow in the many years and decades to come. So I'll leave you with this. When a nation forgets its warriors, who will fight its battles? And when the smoke clears, will we have stood with justice or watched it burn? Leave your thoughts below. I'm Calix Rivers, and this is From the Ashtray. Stay sharp, stay aware, and keep your fire lit. Thank you for watching.